Losing your, oh, recording in progress. Oh no, okay. In losing your mother at the age of 13, you don't get to have some really important conversations with her, obviously. So a poem that I wrote for the book that I'm not going to read tonight is called I Come Out to My Mother at Long Last, which is from my point of view, and it's kind of an idealized version of telling my mother I'm bisexual. And then I wrote this poem as well, which is My Mother Gives Me the Talk at Long Last. And it's, you know, my mom never gave me the talk. And this poem is after Devin Devine, because they're just like, I don't know, they read a lot of sexy poetry. And so I turned to them for inspiration. So, you will know when you are ready. Do not listen to the commotion that prattles on about dragging feet or being a quick draw. It is never that simple, green bean. Let your gut do the talking. Some will look at you as if you are a ham sandwich. They can find a girl like you anywhere they go. Others will look at you like filet mignon. They can't wait to devour you raw, but only on special occasions. Find the one who looks at you like you are breakfast. The first thing they think of when they wake every morning. A man who can crack an egg without a broken yolk has a gentle touch. A woman who knows when to flip the pancakes before they char will be mindful of all your needs. Food is a love language in our family, so love deep from the pit of your stomach. Let your hunger rumble tremendous, a mating call for everyone to hear. Let the ones who touch you study your ravenous desire. When you find someone who knows their way around a kitchen, who kisses like brown sugar on top oatmeal, oh green bean, dig in, fill your belly, ask for seconds, show them how you butter your toast. Let your voice become maple syrup in their mouth. Make breakfast an anytime meal in your future home. May your appetite always be sated. May you never settle for someone who looks at you like you are a cucumber salad or a low-fat cottage cheese. May you find a love who memorizes every recipe of yours so well, cookbooks become obsolete. It's weird because that's probably like the sexiest poem I've ever written, and it's from the point of view of my mom, which I talked with my editor about, and they were like, no, I dig it, don't worry about it. All right, so I'm gonna pivot a little bit on subject matter. This poem is, I'm gonna take a sip of water. Okay, this poem is called Out of Nothing. After I phoned Eileen, I logged into AIM. Only Stella was online. I messaged her, my mom died this morning. I don't know what to do. And Stella answered, that's an awful joke. How could you say that? Just stop for once, stop, and logged off immediately. To this day, I cannot fault her for this knee-jerk response because it's the kind of stupid shit I would have done at that age. Make up a falsity, create drama out of nothing. Stella had no reason to believe I was telling the truth about a story so ugly and unthinkable. She grew up alongside me in my mother's presence. She knew the warmth of my mom. Her kindness, a gift Stella understood was not to be taken for granted. I wonder to this day what went through Stella's head when her parents told her I was not a girl crying wolf. How the nice mom of a close friend would never bring snacks downstairs, give knowing carpool advice, offer a delicate word after a difficult day. Did she cry? Did she say a prayer? Did she regret the words she had written me that afternoon? I do not remember if an apology was ever offered, but it was never needed. What a horror to have a friend's life so utterly shaken, to hope against all odds that it is but a jest, a young girl's fib, and not, in fact, a world crashing down around her. Whew. All right. This is a very short poem. I wrote this back in New Zealand in like 2013 at like 2 a.m. and it's a 4-line poem, and it's just called August 3rd, 2003. A daughter without a mother is like a bird who lost her tail feathers. It is still possible to take flight. It is just a much greater challenge. Right. This next poem is called, if I can get it out of the stack, there we go. I'm also just checking time. I run poetry shows, and so I like have a timer going so I don't go over time. If you ever book a feature or have a show, it's a kind thing to do to the person running the event. All right. This poem is called Waking. One of my mother's students kissed her cheek at the wake, asked my father from the podium if it would be all right. I saw her in a play once where she yelled bitch and my mom scolded me for giggling. Tears poured from her eyes as she kissed my mother's unmoving face. I had stood in front of the casket not 1 hour earlier, looking at my mom for the first time since the hospital, thinking to myself, I don't know who this corpse once belonged to, but it is not the woman who raised me. I did not cry at the wake. I envied my mother's student for this, how I too wished I could burst into sobs, make a grand display of my emotions, then dab the tears away and go home to a family that was still whole, a life that was not lying in a casket. Poem, heavy poems. I am like so out of order. Okay, I'll do this one. So my book, which is called Weirdo, the very first poem in the book was the one that I started off with, which is called Weird. It also ends with a poem called Weirdo, and this is in the middle of the poem and it's called Weirdness. So just, I bring it back around a couple times through the book. For 3 months of my sophomore year, I dressed up as a blues brother, swaggered down the hallways in a fedora, sunglasses, skinny black tie. I thought I was the definition of cool. This was the height of everything I could be. While other lockers were decorated with Channing Tatum and Brad Pitt, mine was adorned with Jon Stewart, Simon Pegg, and lyrics from Rent. I wore a pirate hat to school more than once. I was president of the comedy club. I wrote fan fiction for The Office. I sang Sweeney Todd in between bells. I made text-based Tolkien role plays my 3 a.m. hobby. I consumed every post on the Lost Forum. When my mother died, I threw myself into every morsel of fantasy, stayed up till the crack of dawn reading fanfics, memorized musicals instead of homework, dressed like John Belushi in Homeroom as if to say, I don't live in the real world. I know far too well what reality is capable of when I am here in the fantasy, in this place where death is but an afterthought, where people can come back to life and I can be anybody at all, anybody who isn't me. I don't ever have to remember what drove me here in the first place. Poem. Yeah. All right. I'm going to do this long, sad poem. This is the longest poem in the book. It is probably the hardest poem that I wrote for it. This poem is very much about kind of the friends of this time and also my mother. And in talking with my editor, they were like, you probably need to write something about your dad because, you went through this experience with him as well. And yeah, this ended up becoming the longest poem in the entire book. So I'm going to read this one and then I'm going to try to pivot back into some lighter work as we wrap up. This poem is called My Father and Me in Mourning. I must have seen him cry when I was a child, though I do not recall any shed tears until the after. He cries during movies these days. It seems unfathomable I could go so long without his emotions turning cloudburst in front of me. The first time I saw my father cry was when the older woman with the tight curls and round glasses and checkered blazer said we would be a family of 3 moving forward. My father shouted, "Oh God, no," as he pulled Anthony and me to his chest. The shock of my mother's abrupt exit paired with my father's face turned tidal wave. A month after my mother was buried, John Ritter died from an aortic dissection. He was 4 years older than my mom. I clung to this news with a ferocity that now scares me, cried about John Ritter's death that day at school, acted as though his passing was my greatest tragedy. Somewhere, Eileen has a VHS recording of me shouting, "I love you, John Ritter. Why did you have to die?" The subtext is not lost on me. All I wanted was to call Eileen from the hospital. My father kept saying, "after." I watched him and my mother's family gather around her hospital bed as she faded. All I wanted was my best friend and to wake up. The after came and we could already feel the cracking. When I was 17, my father decided that our dog would undergo cataract surgery. Shock was my father's third child. He brought that dog home for me, but Shock loved no one more than my dad. At 10, our dog's eyes were clouded, a muffled vision. My father saw this as an act of God, a bestowed kindness. I came home for a weekend my junior year of college to attend Billy Elliot the musical with my father. As Billy sang of his mother's last words to him, we cried in ocean's fathom side by side. In the after, it was easiest for our emotions to swallow us whole in the darkness of the theater, an unspoken pact. I sat with a readied box of tissues in front of the TV, waiting for the sitcom to kill off John Ritter's character. I was prepared to cry the whole episode over this man I had never once thought about before his passing. My father entered the room, yelled how I was more upset about the death of a celebrity than I was about my own mother, and stormed out. This episode aired exactly 3 months after my life entered the after. The subtext was lost on my father. Mom was the one who named the family dog. Dad brought the puppy home without consulting her. Shock was the only adjective my mother could muster as my brother and I squirmed and cheered. What a shock to have such a sudden change thrust upon the family, how nothing would ever be the same. There is an entire entry in my 8th grade diary. In a sea of musings on boys and how annoying Anthony was, this one is a sucker punch in tonal shift. I wrote about all of the pretend happiness, how I put on a mask every morning, felt I had to keep my friends smiling, had to keep Anthony and Dad none the wiser. You cannot let people see you grieving months after the after. You are supposed to move on once the casket is in the ground. A fallacy I wish someone had unknotted, a forgotten memory that consumes me. I want to be angry at my father for not reading between the lines of all of my weird, misplaced sadness around John Ritter, but I remind myself of the uncertainty he was wading through back then. He became a professional juggler overnight. Get the kids to school, work full-time, make meals, plan vacations, pay bills on a single salary, budget activities, clean the house, carpool duty, pretend we are a happy, normal family. How much did my father cry when we were not looking? How far did his shoulders slump behind closed doors? To become a widower and single parent in the span of 6 hours, to watch your children not cry for their mother after the funeral was through, to find and marry the love of your life, and to be stuck spiraling alone in the after. My father told me in the car after school that Shock did not make it through the surgery. He went into cardiac arrest and there was no bringing him back. We sat in the garage, the two of us crying for the first time in 5 years, grieving a dog who kept us whole after. My father is a good man. He loved a good woman and raised 2 fairly good children. My father still cries at the saddest parts in films, and in this, I hope to be more like him. How he clutches his bowl of popcorn to his chest, knows what is coming, but cannot look away. He can never help himself from hoping that this time, maybe, just maybe, there will be a happy ending after all. Ooh, that's a long poem. That's a long poem. Oh. Okay, I'm now going to dig through all of these poems that I printed out and try to find, let's see. Yeah, I'm going to try to do a couple more that are a bit lighter than the ones that I just read. So, I'll do this one. It's called In My Memories, The 5 of Us Are Laughing. Sitting in a pew between Stella and Eileen, Father Bob delivering the homily, caught in a sudden unrelated giggle fit that turned contagious, an ocean of hushed snickers. Every other sleepover had a parent stomping down the stairs at 2 a.m., telling us to put an end to the chuckle fest. If you were to rewatch any of our old videotapes, they'd be overflowing with off-screen guffaws. One time, I was lip syncing to a song from the 50s and fell off Laura's card table, and it took hours for the girls to stop laughing at me. One time, Jenna and I passed absurd 2-person fan fiction back and forth under our desks and got caught by Mrs. McCarty because our snorts kept sliding out. One time, I pretended to get stuck in my sleeping bag, and it caused Stella to squeal with delight. One time, we muted the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and play acted the characters' voices and made each each other red in the face, gasping for air as we all tried to outdo each other with our homespun comedy. I know now that much of my 8th grade experience was spent wearing a mask, telling others I was fine when I was anything but. I am sure a great deal of these laughs were artificial, half-hearted, a disguise. But I am grateful for the effort of the Pony Club, how they knew laughter was my favorite pastime, would do anything to make me grin in the wake of all this grief we did not know how to speak of. There is much I do not remember the year after my mother passed, but I do remember the laughter, unguarded and perfect in every way. Oof. I'm gonna do this poem. This poem is called Onward. When watching the movie Onward, it is not lost on me how it is as though the Disney Imagineers opened the brain of my 16-year-old self and plagiarized every single one of her fantasies to spin their latest family lost blockbuster. This want ripped clean through me every teenage breath, how there must be some magic in the world that could give me one more day, memorable last words, a well-earned finale. I did not care if this magic came in the form of Tolkien, Bullock and Kidman, Jesus, Harry, Penn and Teller, Wicca. Someone or something had to hold the secret of how to bring her back to me. I longed for a quest where it ended with seeing her smile one more time, securing a cherished last memory, not some cloudy haze of a moment where I said goodnight to her and was grumpy for a reason I do not now remember, and then she was gone. I would have traveled to the ends of the earth, or at least as far as North Portland, a bicycle my steed, my father's pocket knife my sword, an iPod the bard singing of my glory. I am now a boring adult and know that no one can restore my mother, not even just her legs, and that magic is only a feeling you get when you're first falling in love, or a podcaster acknowledges your existence, or it is Christmas. Magic is the feeling I get when I conjure her smile, or the wacky voices she did in the car, or the absurd songs she created to wake me up. Magic is when I look in the mirror and see her face gazing back. Magic is the pride that blossomed in my chest when Mrs. Salvi told me the way I walked reminded her of my mom. I feel all this magic, however not real I know magic to be, when I think of her, and it will never bring her back, never press me onward, but at least it keeps her with me. Keeps her memory standing still. This is the only spell I will ever need. Poem. How am I on time? Okay, I'm gonna do one more poem. I'm gonna vamp while I'm like trying to figure out what I'm gonna read. There are like so many people that brought this book together. You know, everybody who like touched my life as a kid, but also just everybody like in the, like so many people read this manuscript for me. My editor, Devin Devine, Taylor Smurl, who did the cover art for me. Gosh, Josh, Kaylee, MJ, everybody behind the scenes of Game Over. I'm just like, I'm so endlessly grateful for everybody who has helped me out along the way. I'm trying to decide between two poems. Because one of them, I'm just gonna do this one. I'm gonna end with this poem, which I'm definitely gonna read on Saturday as well, but I'm just gonna read it now as well. So this is the last poem I'll read, and then me and MJ will do some questions and some chatting. This poem is called An Open Letter to the Pony Club, and it starts with this quote. I never had any friends I never had any friends later on like the ones I had when I was 12. Jesus does anyone. And that's from Stand By Me. I have lost track of the years it has been since we all crowded into the same room. I assume the summer before high school was when we last giggled as a whole, though maybe even by then we had known we were beyond our denouement, had begun moving on to greener friendships. Stella and I pass each other in the hallways of Facebook these days. Jenna and I on each other's Instagram stories daily, though rarely exchange dialogue. Laura hasn't been online for years, and best I can tell, she is somewhere in Idaho. Eileen is the only one I catch up with still, but even with her, I can be a forgetful flake of a friend. I do not know if the five of us will ever fill a space with our thunderous weird again, but there is still so much I want to say to you. I expect you four to still carry that banner with pride. I know the adults we grew into would bring delight and wow to those fifth grade losers sitting cross-legged in Laura's basement, laughing with popcorn-filled mouths. I want you to remember the 5 of us rushing to the cinema the moment the school bell rang, crammed in the front row of Return of the King, the worst possible seats, how we left spilling over with astonished happiness. I hope good things never falter in finding you. I dream, should any of us have daughters, they will know the same tooth and nail friendship that we were so lucky to cradle in our tenacious hearts. I trust when you are on a road trip and pass a field overflowing with horses, you catch yourself mid-sigh. I pray I cross your mind in fondness some fleeting moments, maybe while you're putting sugar in your coffee, or when the word wild is spoken aloud, or when you see a child do a cartwheel. I hope you know how much I loved you as a kid. I hope you know how much I still love you even after all of this time. You kept me alive after my mother. You kept me tittering on the bleak days. You kept me myself when I longed to be anything but. I would not be who I am without the 4 of you. I would not still be here without any of you, you cackling fiends, you secret keepers, you daydreaming gods, the miracles you worked, the magic you never knew you were capable of. All right, thank you. That's the last poem. Oh my gosh, I need to drink some water now. Okay.
Oh, come on. Give it up for Julia, everyone.
Oh my gosh. I haven't
What an
even
incredible reading.
chat section. Oh.
Hell yeah. Please blow up that chat. Blow it up for love for this poet. Just, that was wonderful. Oh my God. I'm so excited to chat a little bit. Also, shout out to you good folks out there in the audience, the chat. Thank you. Had to deal with a little bit of trash at the beginning. Took me a minute to throw it out. So appreciate y'all keeping it down. And that being said, yeah, we're gonna do a little bit of a Q&A. I already do have one question from the audience, and I have some other pre-prepared questions to kick us off. But folks, if you have any questions for the author, please throw them over in the chat. I'll try to catch as many as I can. But yeah, so first off, I know you don't have it right in front of you, but I do want to talk about the cover because it's super freaking cool. And I'll actually bring it up in a second and share it, but I want to mainly talk about the pop culture iconography that's on it, because obviously the cover went through a couple of designs because there were certain things that, you know, legally we might not have been able to put on the cover. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that did inspire this really, really awesome cover. And
yeah, you know, I know that at least 2 of the things that were originally on the cover that had to be taken off was I mean, there's still definitely like an anime girl down at the bottom. That 100% was Sailor Moon originally. And Josh was like, we can't have Sailor Moon on the cover. That could get us sued. You know, we also, I think those cards in the middle were Pokemon cards. There might have been like a Millennium Falcon somewhere. You know, just some like very obvious baby copyright infringement. So we kind of just like tweaked it a bit. And so there's still homages to the pop culture that was important to me as a kid, but ones that wouldn't get us sued. You know, but I think Taylor did such an amazing job. Taylor read the manuscript. I was the one who was like, you know, maybe a sleepover. I had a hard time kind of trying to pinpoint what I wanted the cover to be, because so much of the book is about my childhood friendships, but also so much is about the loss of my mother. And I was having a hard time trying to conceive what like the marriage of the 2 would be. And they like took the idea of a sleepover, but also like threw in that like anxious, sad girl in the sleeping bag at the bottom. And I think that really kind of portrays a lot of what this book is. You know, it's a celebration of being amongst your friends while also going through something that, you know, maybe not everybody like you feel like understands what you are going through at the same time. And yeah, just, you know, I can't like sing Taylor's praises enough. Taylor has an Etsy with a lot of beautiful art. Go buy some of their art. They're amazing.
Yeah, no, seriously, they really, really nailed it. I'm so excited for people to like get their hands on this one. It's such a cool cover. And yes, shout out to Josh. We don't have the money to fight Nintendo. That's absolutely accurate. Maybe one day, not today. But that being said, I want to talk a little bit about the overall arc of the book, because as some of the blurbs and praise for the book have pinpointed, it is very cinematic. in a lot of the writing, and I'm particularly curious about you have poems that are specifically dedicated to some of these people that have had a beautiful influence on your life, friends and loved ones. And so throughout the book, you have these poems that pay homage to your Pony Club cohort, and they create a foundation for the narrative arc of the collection in a similar way to how they might have been pivotal relationships to the foundation of your adolescence. And so I'm curious what the process was like for arranging these poems, like in an actual coming of age film. Like, how did you know when certain people or characters like needed to make an entrance in this book?
Yeah, for the most part, the way the poems are organized is it's really chronological. Like I kind of try to like bring it about of, things happening in the correct order. But there are some poems that appear later in the book because it feels more like reflecting on something as an adult. And so, I tried kind of like switching things around and just having poems appear randomly, but it read the best to me as if you were reading, it's weird to call it a story and like call them characters, because as a poet, I do honestly try to tell the truth. I know that there are some poets out there that don't, but I try to stay as truthful as I can to my memories and to the people who I'm writing about. And so I did kind of try to stick to that. As for the people who make appearances in this, when I first kind of knew I wanted to write a book called Weirdo, and like that word just kept popping up in a lot of my poetry, I was really stuck on like, well, what's like kind of be kind of the foundation of it. And I was at the writing retreat, The Heart of It, run by Desiree Della Giacomo. And I was reading some books, and I can't for the life of me remember what it was, but I was reading this one book and it gave me inspiration to write a poem about my friend Stella, and how I didn't read the poem in this session, but I wrote a poem about how I had seen her in the last year or two, like in public, but I just didn't go up and speak to her because I didn't know what I was like going to say to her. And I was like, well, this is interesting. Like, I think I want to think about these friends that I had in middle school that were very important to me at the time, some of whom I haven't talked to in a couple of years. And that kind of just led me into writing a lot about these four girls and myself. And, they're them outside of my mother are like, they're the main catalysts of the book. But then like in just thinking about other things I went through at the time or other people who were important to me, it did feel necessary to bring other quote unquote characters into the manuscript. I've got a poem from my friend Connie, who was like a very large part of me going to high school and kind of finding myself in high school, being kind of a weird outsider kid who also was like dealing with a lot of depression that she didn't really know how to deal with at the time. I wrote a poem for my friends from elementary school who were my best friends, but also as we aged, they were kind of more into boy bands and Lizzie McGuire, and I was into Lord of the Rings and Star Wars. And that poem is like, it's still a love letter to them, but it's also talking about how it's okay to kind of grow apart and go separate ways as you age. And, there a lot of names and people pop up throughout. And I think those people, the other people that make appearances, is more just because I was looking at moments and memories that felt important to share in the book. And people just happen to be in those moments and memories. So
No, absolutely.
yeah, it's a big cast of characters.
Yeah. So jumping off of, because you were kind of touching a bit upon, the title of the book being Weirdo, and it kind of comes up a lot through the collection, just kind of reminiscing on taking a label or a moniker or something that was given to you, whether it was through bullying or a different type of prejudice, but kind of reclaiming it for yourself, right? Finding power in that. And in particular, in the poem Misplaced, you kind of speak of the origin of the Pony Club name and how it was more harmful in origin. So I'm curious to some of the folks out there as well, what advice you might have for people that are trying to kind of reclaim and take power from labels that were prescribed to them in a similar way.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a spoiler, but really late in the book, I have all these poems about my friend group and how we were called the Pony Club. And in all of the poems, like leading up to it, it's like this reverence and this like, oh, we were the Pony Club and we loved being that club together. And then later in the book, I had the experience of one of my very good friends, Eileen, who's mentioned in the book, and I believe is or was in this chat. I sent her a really early draft of the manuscript, and she's like, hey, this is great, but also we didn't give ourselves the name of the Pony Club and we hated it. We didn't have fake horses we rode around. We had unicorns, and people gave us this name and used it to taunt us. And so that poem that I wrote, Misplaced, is really about how memory is so weird. And like, I don't know, like how I have such a positive attachment to the name The Pony Club, like after all of this time. So that's an interesting one. But I think like in reclaiming like a name like The Pony Club, or even like just the title of Weirdo, Weird, you know, wait, I have like completely like just like advice on how to like kind of go about doing it. You know, I don't know, just time is a big factor. I think just, I don't know, being comfortable in your own skin, which is hard to do when you're an awkward teenage or preteen kid. But, you know, I really think just having like the support system and having like a good group of friends around you and who like relish in, you know, you or all of you being weirdos together, and, you know, being a weird group of friends that like running around a field pretending you have horses together. I don't think I would be the person I am today without like the people I've always had surrounding me. And that's the people in this book, but also I really didn't touch on my high school experience too much in this book, but I had like a really solid, large group of friends in high school who were also fucking weird. I had great friends in college who maybe were a little less weird, but loved me for my weirdness. And now I'm poetry slam is my main community, and slam poets are fucking weird. So,
Really?
you know, I would always just say like surrounding yourself and just like, you know, taking the things that hurt you and just reclaiming them, and I don't know, giving us a new life to them.
Absolutely. So actually to go off of that, one question from the audience, it was from Addie. So we have a question: if a teen or tween just as weird and nerdy as you picked up your book, what would you want to say to them?
I don't know. I mean, if they're just as weird and nerdy as I was, just like, you know, just keep doing you. And like there are going to be hard days, and there are definitely going to be those people that don't understand you. But you know, again, I probably will keep coming back to this. Like there are going to be people that do understand you and love you for the ways that you express yourself and the things that you're interested in. There's always community out there. I think like, especially like these days with social media, which was kind of coming around when I was of this age, but nowadays I feel like it's so easy to find your people. And yeah, just, you know, remind yourself that it's okay to, I don't know, make up weird songs to yourself or dress up like a pirate in public. You know, if it makes you happy, then, and it's not hurting anybody, then fucking go for it.
Yeah. So I'm curious a little bit about some of your like poetic influences that you might have had during the writing of this book. And in particular, there are some poems that are like in conversation with books like our own Catherine Weiss's Wolf Girls versus Horse Girls, right? And so I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more about some of the poetic influences that you might have had during your writing process.
Yeah, I mean, I read a lot of poetry while I was writing. I don't know if there's any particular folks that stand out. You know, I actually didn't read Catherine's book all the way through until I was pretty close to having this one wrapped. There was a poem in the book that I talked with my editor and publisher about, because it's called Horse Girls. And I was like, Catherine's book came out like a year or two ago, and it's called Horse Girls versus Wolf Girls. So I wonder if people would like tie the two together, because they obviously have similar themes. But I mean, I can't sing Catherine Weiss's praises enough. Catherine Weiss is an amazing poet and the best at writing form poems of anybody that I know. But I think honestly, just being in slam poetry for the last like 8-9 years at this point has been probably the biggest influence, and like going to big national competitions and touring and seeing poems from like different scenes and different communities. Especially because this book is so narrative driven, and that's for the most part slam poetry is very narrative focused. I think that really has helped me in honing kind of my voice and my storytelling over the years. And you know, I could like list some of my like favorite poets like Andrea Gibson, Olivia Wilde, Will Evans, Hanifa Durrakib, Sam Cooke, all of the poets out there, really. Local poet Doc Lubin, Brenda Toohey, like Clementine von Rax. You know, there are a slew of like folks I look up to and love. And I just think it's just a culmination of, you know, of all of those poets and the influences they've had on me over the years. And, you know, and the local poets who were like my mentors as I was coming up, really helping me like find and define my own voice.
Awesome. And one more question, I think, just to round us out tonight, and this is just more of a, a fun and like curious on my part. So obviously, tons of references to fan fiction throughout the book for a number of reasons. And so for the folks at home, I was wondering if you would tell us what is the piece of fan fiction that you are most proud of creating
Oh,
and why?
so I mean, I was definitely one of those kids who had dozens of spiral notebooks and over 100 saved documents on her computer that were all starts of fanfics, a chapter or two, ideas that like almost never got completed. I recently got diagnosed with ADHD, and suddenly it makes so much more sense why I would be like, here's an idea. I would start it, I'd get super into it, and then I'd move on to the next idea. I was trying to think of like, because you said these questions to me before, and I was like, fan fiction that I'm proud of. I did have like five stories for the movie The Blues Brothers, and they were all going to tie together. I had like a
My
cinematic Blues
God.
Brothers fan fiction experience that did not come together.
Yes.
But if I had actually had the gumption and the focus to do it as a kid, probably that. I mean, I did write in college, I did write some stories for The Hobbit, and those ones are good because I was older and I was better at writing at that point, and I did follow through. So there's that as well. They're on the internet somewhere. I probably won't tell you where they are, but they're in existence. I wrote a lot of like Mary Sue self-insert, self and friends insert fan fiction as a kid, which I had a couple of poems that touched on fan fiction. I cannot sing the praise of the fan fiction also enough. Like, I don't think I would be a writer if it wasn't for fan fiction, and anyone that shits on it is wrong. It's such a good tool for young people, especially who are trying to like figure out how to like get about on writing, because fan fiction, like, it gives you boundaries to work in when you're first starting out. It gives you the world, it gives you the characters, the tone, and you can start with that, and then eventually you can like throw in new characters, you can make an AU, you can like just do all of these different things. But that is like where I first started really writing. And while I don't really write and read also fan fiction as much as I do nowadays, I think it's so great. I do write a lot of like nerdy poetry though, so I guess in a way that's like my new fan fiction is pop culture poetry.
Well, you're crushing it,
big ups
and
to fan
honestly, I am so excited for the fan fiction collection that will from you in 2024. I'm calling it right now. No, I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. Well, on that, folks, that is our Q&A and our reading for tonight. Thank you, Julia, so much. Another round of applause for our amazing poet tonight and this incredible book, Weirdo, that is going to be officially released tomorrow, and it's going to be out in the world this week. We're going to be seeing folks reading this incredible book, and we just are so excited to celebrate with you tonight. So thank you everyone for coming. I did remember to record, and there will be a recording going up on the Game Over Books YouTube channel. God, I wish there was a slicker way to do it. They really just like rat you out right away. So sorry for that, but there will be a recording on the Game Over Books YouTube channel later in a couple of weeks. But enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone. So glad you could be here. I'm going to drop a link to the book in the chat, and be well, everybody. Have a good night.